Well, Donald Trump's destruction of the Department of Justice and the once proud Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office claims another victim, this time Beth or Elizabeth Yusi, who had been the head of the Major Crimes Division based in Norfolk, Virginia, until about a week or so ago, she let it be known that she was not going to recommend the indictment of the New York Attorney General, Tish James. She let that leak. She said she was going to be telling her boss, quote unquote, Lindsay Halligan, the insta-prosecutor with no prosecutorial experience that Donald Trump put in as a partisan hack to go after his political enemies. When you have people like Beth Yusi standing up for herself and letting it leak that she was not going to recommend an indictment, that she had looked carefully over all of the mortgage documents and the mortgage loan documents, it concluded that she cannot, under the federal principles of prosecution, or the principles of federal prosecution or the Department of Justice manual, she could not in good conscience and in good faith bring a case against Tish James because she took out she bought a second home. The bank knew she had a second home, and she let family members live there with paperwork filled out by her niece with a power of attorney. Nowhere in there is a crime, certainly not mortgage fraud. And Beth Yusi let people know it. And now, just as expected, I'm surprised it lasted this long, she's been fired. I'm Michael Popok. You're on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF, No Kings Weekend and all. Let's talk about Beth Yusi. This is where the career prosecutors and the rubber is meeting the road. As Jack Smith just said recently in one of his recent interviews, knowing that he'd be gagged behind a closed door once testifying at Congress, he got his story out straight with people that he's worked with, like Alan Weissman. And he said point blank, career prosecutors are agnostic politically. They don't think about politics. They shouldn't think about politics. Let's play the Jack Smith tape.
This latest prosecution of the former director of the FBI. There's a process to secure an indictment. There's a process of predication, having some evidence before you do that. And again, I only know what I see myself in the media, but the career prosecutors, the apolitical prosecutors who analyzed this said there wasn't a case. And so they brought somebody in who had never been a criminal prosecutor on days' notice to secure an indictment a day before the statute of limitations ended. That just reeks of lack of process. And I think a lot of Americans do not see this as a political issue. Process shouldn't be a political issue, right? Like if there's rules in the department about how to bring a case, follow those rules. You can't say, I want this outcome, let me throw the rules out. That's why, frankly, you see all these conflicts between the career apolitical prosecutors I worked with, because they're being asked to do things that they think are wrong. And because they're not political people, they're not going to do them. And I think that explains why you've seen the resignations, you've seen people leave the department. It's not because they're enemies of one administration or the next. They've worked through decades for different administrations. It's just they've been doing things apolitically forever. And when they're told, no, you got to get this outcome no matter what, that is so contrary to how we were all raised as prosecutors. I think that's been the center of all the conflict.
And so career prosecutors that remain within the Department of Justice find themselves on the horns of a dilemma. Do they continue to violate their oath of office, their ethics, their professional responsibility code of conduct, and do the bidding of the Trump administration? Or do they try to have a resistance from within, and failing that, are they then shown the door? Now, we know what happened next. Tish James was indicted. In fact, it turned out to be a surprise to the Department of Justice and its leadership. It's now well known and well reported and not denied by the Department of Justice that Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche, the number 1 and number 2 in the Department of Justice, were against the indictment. They were against Donald Trump's dismissal of Eric Siebert, a conservative Republican who had been appointed to head the Eastern District of Virginia, because he would not indict Comey. He would not indict Tish James. This is all in the Eastern District of Virginia. This is separate and apart from the career prosecutors who work in Maryland, who brought their prosecution against John Bolton. That's different. We're talking about Tish James. We're talking about profiles in courage, like Beth Yusi, who said no and has now been fired. What does that say about a president who can't tolerate dissent, who won't allow career prosecutors who are just doing their job, regardless of who's in office. He finds them a threat and must have them removed. Lindsay Halligan, I'm sure, didn't remove Beth Yusi. I'm sure it was a combination of Ed Martin, who's effectively the shadow attorney general for Donald Trump. It's not Pam Bondi. It's Ed Martin and Donald Trump. Ed Martin, a failed private lawyer, had been a federal prosecutor, assistant U.S. attorney at one point, Jan 6 denier, Jan 6 defender, was going to be in the U.S. attorney's office as the U.S. attorney in D.C., but his MAGA values and MAGA statements were too extreme even for the Republicans in the Senate. He couldn't get that job. So they made him the pardon attorney, and they made him the head of the weaponization of the Justice Department committee. I think that is an appropriately named entity, don't you? So Ed Martin is the one that's had it out for Tish James. Ed Martin is the one that marched on her house wearing a trench coat in August, trying to be a sleuth in Brooklyn to look at her residence. It's Ed Martin, I'm sure, that's directing Lindsay Halligan to fire somebody like Beth Yusi or call for her resignation. And this is a compliment and I want to be supportive and give a shout of confidence to somebody like Miss Yusi, who's standing up, who's resisting for as long as she could within the administration. As soon as I reported that she let it leak that in a couple of weeks she was going to get around to telling Lindsay Halligan that she was not going to be recommending an indictment, I said, is she still? I made a joke once during one of my reports. I said, by the time I'm done with this report, I could be next reporting that Beth Yusi is fired. And now it's happened. She's not the only one there. This is now the 5th or 6th in the leader, on top level within the Eastern District of Virginia, making us all unsafe. The Eastern District of Virginia, one of the first federal districts we've ever had, created in 1789 at the time of our Constitution. It was split into two, but the Eastern District of Virginia is one of the original federal districts. It's where the CIA and the Pentagon is, and therefore they handle some of the most sophisticated cases they had it anyway in the past: anti-terrorism and narcotics and espionage, all come through the Eastern District of Virginia with a bench that is remarkable in terms of the quality of the judges on the bench. It's known as the rocket docket because they move the cases there at a velocity I'm not familiar with other federal courts. That's why James Comey's going to trial January the 5th of this coming year. So we are worse off. We are poorer as a nation because we lost Beth Yusi from the Department of Justice. She is one of 5,000 employees, hardworking employees at every level in the Department of Justice that have left, been fired, been reassigned, forced to resign, and the like. They have not been replaced, and if they have been replaced, it's with MAGA 20 and 30-year-olds who don't know apologize to 20 and 30-year-olds. MAGA people who are inexperienced, who don't understand how to run a Department of Justice, who don't have the gravitas to run a Department of Justice, not at the size of the United States of America. And we are poorer for it. Thank you for your service. I mean that with all humility and all gratitude to Beth Yusi, formerly the head of the Major Crimes Unit, prosecutor, Eastern District of Virginia. Until my next report, you're on the MeidasTouch Network. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Come over to Legal AF YouTube. Do the exact same thing. Now is the time to defend our right to be heard, our right to have free expression of our speech, free expression of thought, free thought. Now is the time to protect MeidasTouch and Legal AF. Hit the subscribe button. Come over to Legal AF Substack and do the exact same thing. Till my next report, I'm Michael Popok. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.